All politics is identity politics. Welcome to Identity Politics, everyone. I'm DeAnna. There's a lot to talk about this week, a lot of it optimistic. A lot of what we're going to be doing this week, we'll be going over the Remigration Summit recently concluded in Portugal. And this is a time for optimism because we are seeing what I've been hoping for and working for basically my entire life, a united movement to reclaim our countries, all of our countries in Europe, in America, in the entire Occident. And yet I don't want to talk about any of that right now because we have to start with what just came out of the United Kingdom in the case of Henry Nowak. And we've discussed this case before. Henry Nowak was a young white man who was stabbed by one Vikram Digwa, who for some reason is in the United Kingdom with his entire family. After Nowak was stabbed, he was arrested by British police officers and died choking on his own blood. Why? Because Digwa used the magic word and accused Nowak of racism. And the British police instantly responded. Now, this we knew, but knowing about it and seeing it are two different things. What did Nowak look like when the police responded, when he claimed he had been stabbed? Did police at least take him seriously? What were the Sikhs saying at the time? Did they appear credible? These are all reasonable questions. I mean, let's be overly fair here. Maybe British police handcuff white youth to die while screeching foreigners accuse of racism. Maybe that's a bit sensational, right? Maybe we should be fair. We shouldn't engage in hyperbole. We must not exaggerate the facts for political advantage. Fine. This is American Renaissance. We have a certain tone here. Well, a few things have happened. First, Digwa was convicted of murder. So we don't have to tiptoe around anymore and excuse anything and say alleged. No, he's a convicted murderer. He was sentenced to life with a 21-year minimum, minus the time already spent, which doesn't really seem like a life sentence to me, but what do I know compared to the majesty of British law? But at least he was convicted and he will go to jail. Now, at the time of sentencing and apparently afterwards, there was shouting and various altercations, this from various media outlets. The ex-account Vox Populi claimed that during sentencing, a man in a turban shouted racism at the judge. Yet we also learned from Sky News that the judge was especially concerned about the potential backlash against the Sikhs. So in an article entitled, Vikram Digwa's sentencing as it happened, angry shouting in court as killer jailed for murder of student, Judge William Mosley says, quote, "You have brought shame upon your family and your religion," the judge tells Vikram Digwa. "Your actions have stirred up racial tension in Southampton and across the country, which have made many Sikhs worried about their safety." Even in this case, they're the priority. Think about that. This is the sickness of the West. Non-whites slaughter a white youth, and it doesn't even occur to a white judge to interpret this as an attack on his people. But don't get it twisted. He's not saying this because he believes in individualism. He's not saying it because he believes race doesn't matter. Because the judge's concern at this moment is the communal shame that this murder might bring on a community of non-whites, or even on their religion. No one is disputing the validity of community pride or even the collective honor of a race or religion. Everybody apparently agrees these things exist and are important, and the state even has a role to protect them, but they only apply to non-whites. In fact, the very reason we have to react so strongly against this crime is to make sure these things are protected. In contrast, a white victim, he's just an individual. Yeah, it's sad, no one thinks it's okay, but he has relevance to his family and friends, and that's it. If you feel any kind of solidarity with him, link your fate to his, you're the problem. You're fostering division. You're fostering community tensions. You're promoting hate. Don't look back in anger, mate. That's what they want you to believe. Now, the victim's family, as you might expect, is heartbroken. The father has called for a full, fearless, and transparent investigation. As quoted by Sky News, he said the following, quote, "Instead of being treated as a dying victim, police formally arrested Henry for assault and read him his rights. That was the last thing he heard. Let us be clear. We hold Vikram Digwa solely responsible for the brutal murder of our son, but Henry should not have died on the streets of Southampton in police custody. The way he was inhumane and degrading. His murderer was afforded decency. He was believed. He was not handcuffed. The contrast is unbearable," unquote. Now, at the same time, the father has also said he does not want the case to, quote, "create further division, hatred, or tension." Now, of course, nobody does. And one is inclined to forgive someone who is, after all, mourning the death of his son. And we also know, as happened in America until the Trump administration defunded it, governments have teams that work with victims' families, white victims' families, and kind of walk them through what to say to reduce tensions, which is why these guys always sound like they're reciting a script. This had nothing to do with race, blah, 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 blah. We absolutely know this is what the DOJ was doing in America until the current administration. Now, we do not specifically know what is going on in the United Kingdom, but given the far more intensive efforts to regulate social behavior, control speech, have designated community leaders for various non-whites that liaison with the state, it is very reasonable to suggest that someone told them to say something. But I can't prove it. And maybe he even means it. Let's assume he does. That doesn't mean he's right. Because you have to ask yourself, why did the police respond in the way they did? Because the father himself acknowledges the response is unbearable. Why did the police believe the Sikh about a claim of racism and take it seriously, but not care about a white kid claiming he had been stabbed? Why did they let them choke on his own blood before their eyes while they nodded solemnly along while a Sikh complained about racism? Don't worry, though. Tommy Robinson tells us the Sikhs are just as British as anyone else. At least they're not Muslim, right, guys?
All the history of Luton Town, this is now an Islamic town.
And if this were a Sikh town, would you have the same problem?
I wouldn't have a problem, no.
Tell me why.
No, because the Sikh community integrate, assimilate, and they work very hard. There's no dominating gangs. They're not attacking our culture. In fact, they integrate and they become British.
No, this misses the point, Tommy. It's not about some stupid hierarchy of groups. None of these people should be here. All are destructive to the white population, and whites are always going to be treated worse off in this multicultural model, regardless of what groups are there, because this is what happened, and this is what is unarguably true at this point. A Sikh, who for some reason is in Britain, stabbed a young white man. He has knives that no one else is allowed to have because they have a special religious exemption. The Anglo-Saxons themselves are literally named after a bladed weapon. They don't get to carry them. Sikhs do. The police respond. They are told this is about racism. The police instantly believe it and arrest the victim. They don't even believe the victim when he claims he has been stabbed, which you would think is a pretty important thing to respond to, regardless of who's making the claim. I mean, if he's lying, you're going to figure this out pretty quick. There's no reason not to check unless you decide this person is just beneath notice. But he is beneath notice. He's a white kid. He has no community at his back. He has no political clout. He has no community leaders. Why should police care? That's what happened. That's not up for debate. Understand, in every society, the function of police is not to protect you. It is to protect the social order. And I want to be clear here. I'm not criticizing police. Speaking very precisely here, I'm not saying police don't protect you, or we don't need them, or we need to defund them, or something like that. But what I'm saying, and this is just true, the fundamental role of the institution of the police everywhere, in every system, ever, is to protect the social order and the state they serve. That is what it's for. I mean, as an aside, the Supreme Court in this country has ruled that the police do not have a responsibility to protect you individually. DeShaney v. Winnebago County. Chief Justice Rehnquist wrote, "Nothing in the language of the Due Process Clause itself requires the state to protect the life, liberty, and property of its citizens against invasion by private actors." You're on your own. That is the law. United Kingdom is no different, neither is anyone else. That's not what the police are for. When we look at police, we are looking at political actors. That's what they are. That's why in every revolutionary situation, the questions that really matter are who gets control of the police and who gets control of domestic law enforcement. Any of you guys, by the way, just remember this. I mean, do me this favor. Any of you guys get elected to something or launch a coup or something and get to control one ministry, pick the police. That's the one you want. How police respond, who gets taken seriously, what's considered a threat to the social order, what's considered harmless activism, which communities are given preferential treatment, which communities are not. These are political questions. They're the most political questions. This is where power actually matters. And where does power come from in a multicultural, multiracial society? Altogether now, from identity, from ethnic solidarity, from the ability to operate as a bloc. That's how you force politicians to respond. That's how you get law enforcement to cater to you. That's how you get businesses to pay you off, to keep on your good side. I mean, look at the careers of Jesse Jackson or Al Sharpton. And that's even how you can shape media. That's how you can get reporters to take your concerns seriously. From straight news reporting to movies and pop culture, what do people talk about in media other than questions of representation and stereotypes? Why? Because everybody knows the way the media portrays you and your community matters. It matters in terms of how power is going to treat you. Everyone recognizes this. Everyone operates based on this recognition, except when it comes to white people. Now it doesn't matter. Now you're an individual. Now the system may or may not do what it's supposed to, but you've got no community at your back. So you have no way to enforce it, so it doesn't matter. So nobody cares. If you have no identity, you have no tribe, you don't matter, especially in a liberal democracy. It's precisely in an egalitarian liberal democracy where racial solidarity and ethnic identity matters the most, because collective solidarity is the only way you can protect your individual interests unless you've got a ton of money. Now, this sounds abstract, right? What does this mean? How does this actually play out? Okay, well, now we know this Sikh murderer has been convicted, and so they have to release more stuff about it because they don't have to say alleged or protect the accused or any of this. So now I can show you. This footage was recently released by British police. Now, I don't like long videos on here, but it's only a couple of minutes, and it's worth watching the whole things. These are Henry Nowak's final moments. Now, I want you to watch this carefully. Turn everything else off. Pay attention. Give me 3 minutes here. I want you to really look, really listen to how police respond to Nowak's desperate pleas and what the claims of the Sikhs are. This is that body cam footage.
My dad's holding it now. Right. He keeps dropping side to side, so I'm just trying to keep him set up.
Right.
He's got a mouthful of blood, I don't want him.
He was on the bin on the other side of this gate.
He's jumped over these fences and stuff like that. And
Right.
he's up
Move
here.
away, mate.
He's obviously, he's fallen
Right.
from there and he slipped from there.
There's other shoes left over there, mate.
What's your name, mate? Huh? Has anyone been hurt other than him?
Yeah, me.
He's grabbed my brother, he's took my turban off, started grabbing my head.
Are you
like
injured?
that. Yeah, I've got swollen eye, little bruise.
Alright, just step back a little bit for me. Someone flag these down.
Got this stud.
Right, let's get you out of there, shall we? Oh.
I was in bed asleep. Whenever we just find me up there, look, someone's attacked me.
I can't breathe.
Grab his other arm.
So I've just come running, we only live
Blood,
on
blood.
St. Denny's Road.
Blood.
Come running around the corner.
What's happened to you, alright?
This stud.
You've been stabbed? Whereabouts? Don't think you have, mate.
Look, that's what, and then I'm like, you've got nothing, I want to keep you up, keep you off.
Hand?
So what he's done, he's attacked my nipper.
I can't breathe.
Put the hand in the cuff, mate.
This is like
can't breathe.
times this has happened to us. We've been walking, we parked literally.
Can we get a van for one of
We've had people racist
90
attacks,
foot.
and nothing happened.
He's saying he's been stabbed, so
Where
let's
is it
just
you
check
think you've
him.
been stabbed? In the face? Oh no, but we have to check, don't we?
Right.
In the face?
Just get these to back off, get their details and that, and I'll keep hold of him.
Should we
Right, keep you on your side, mate. You better retrieve then.
So, yeah.
Saying to him, I'm keeping him on his side. We were set up when we had him here, but he didn't like it. What's your name, mate? At the moment you are under arrest, and that's for assault, so you do not have to say anything, may harm and defence if you do not mention when questioned. It's up to which you later line of court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence, alright? It's going to be sick, I think.
What's his name?
I just want you to call it.
Yeah, we've got this male, he's
just-
been beat up. Are we able to get an ambulance, please?
His pupils aren't even reacting.
It's so much worse than what we were even expecting. And a great way for that to end, right? Like, oh, I'm shining a light in his face and his pupils aren't even responding. Yeah, maybe I have a problem. Maybe when someone says they've been stabbed and they're gasping, not this performative, oh, reporters, come look at me, but he's gasping in desperation. He's drowning. He was drowning in his own blood. He's saying, I can't breathe. He's begging. Maybe the response shouldn't be, put your hands in the cuff, mate. You're under arrest for assault, mate. I can't breathe. Remember how our country burned to the ground because George Floyd said that? Last week, we had TJ Harker, author of American Scapegoat. He wrote a whole book about the George Floyd case. And he pointed out that, yeah, George Floyd was saying that because he was on drugs, and he was saying that even before he was on the ground. But those important facts didn't even matter. The whole world stood up and took notice. Politicians in other countries, including Prime Minister Keir Starmer, by the way, took a knee. Here's that, over George Floyd. Religious leaders, priests, pastors, they were comparing George Floyd to Jesus. Every corporation in America was dumping millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter. You had Mitt Romney marching with protesters, statues getting torn down, you name it. Here, white kid dying after some savage stabs him with this magic Chris knife or whatever the hell it's supposed to be. He's practically mocked as he dies by agents of the state, and no one who matters cares, not one. I want you to take a good look at this still from the footage you just saw. Look at that right there. Look how pale his hand was as they were handcuffing him. Yeah, that's what happens when you're stabbed and your body is trying desperately to stay alive. You don't get any blood in your extremities anymore. And you have all these like weird hands all over him with their stupid gloves, giving everything this alien, almost demonic appearance. You got the stupid fake nails that the female officer has in the top right. Looks like a claw. I mean, look, fundamentally, I'm a writer. I distrust a single image being used for a political agenda because it's often missing context, right? Like, think of the execution of that guy in Saigon who was a Viet Cong operating without wearing a uniform. You've seen it. They force you to see it in school. You've seen that a million times. Now, the more you find out about the photo, the more you feel lied to, right? Even the guy who took the photo, who wasn't some radical, I think he was a former U.S. Marine. He took the photo, and afterward, he basically said he metaphorically killed the man who performed the execution, and he felt bad about it. Why? Because you're not getting the full story. You're not thinking about the deaths the executed man caused. You're not seeing him as an enemy. You don't know what even caused it. If you're a normie, so to speak, you just say, oh, there's this poor man being executed by the scary army man. Isn't this awful? Isn't this fascism? Blah, 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 blah. This is the core playbook for the left for every photo you've ever seen. I'm performatively crying. I'm performatively looking weak. Oh no, I'm crumpled before the large, scary men in uniform. This shows I deserve your pity. This shows you need to be motivated by guilt. Just this kind of stuff over and over and over again. You've seen it. And of course, when someone is trying to appeal to your pity and your guilt, you're being sold something. You're being manipulated against your own interests. No one ever does this to help you. It's only to get you to do something that will hurt you and help them. But now go back to this. Look at this. This hits precisely because it was not staged. It could not have been staged. It was not done in a self-aware way. The officers here don't even see the problem. And we know the context, most importantly. We know all of the context, and the context makes it much worse. This is business as usual. And this is the key. When people say things like, oh, we can't let the far right divide us. This is just about one victim. It's not about any larger questions. Don't make this political. No. It is entirely political, and not just in the way that law enforcement is always political. It's political precisely because of the context, because this only happens in a system that is explicitly anti-white, where police know with absolute certainty that they must prioritize non-whites and their feelings and interests. The British state, and it's not really different than any other state in the Western world, does not regard hatred as anything that can be suffered by white people. White people are just individuals, non-whites belong to groups, therefore the latter deserve additional consideration. Remember, the Keir Starmer government released a plan on social cohesion just a few months ago that we discussed on this program. It was called Protecting What Matters Towards a More Confident, Cohesive, and Resilient United Kingdom. And part of it specifically called for more attention to so-called hate crimes. They said, quote, race hate crimes rose by 6% in the year ending March 2025, and we know that not all crimes are reported, but hate crime statistics only scratch the surface. Behind them lies a quieter erosion of trust. People of Roma heritage who face prejudice, the Hindu family whose local temple has been vandalized, the Muslim woman who avoids certain areas when walking alone, or the Jewish family who are less open about their identity. The result is a climate in which prejudice can harden, grievances can fester, and extreme voices find a receptive audience, unquote. Now notice who is not mentioned in this recounting of woe. That's right, the white English people in the only country they have. There is no Israel for the white English. There is no homeland in the Middle East or the subcontinent they can go back to. This is it. This is all they've got. And you would think that this would mean they should get extra protection in their homeland, but instead they get less. And the report continued. Those in positions of power and responsibility have a role in promoting a confident, modern patriotism, not least because the failure to do so in recent years has created space for the extreme right to equate being English with being white or being Christian, exploit national identity as an ethnic construct tied to race or religion, something the vast majority of people reject, unquote. Here's the key. This is a lie. No one rejects that. No one rejects that idea. Forget the idea that it's somehow wrong to equate being English with being white or being Christian or tied to race or religion, because it obviously is. That's what a national identity literally means, and it's something that we know to be true with everyone else. I mean, imagine flapping your wrists and hyperventilating about someone saying Sikh identity is tied to ethnicity and religion. Yes, obviously, that's what it is. But here's the key. Police responses have to consider race. You always have to consider these things tied to race and religion, especially in law enforcement. And we've talked about this before. Think of the Stephen Lawrence case. Refresh your memory. This was a black kid who was killed by some white guys. This single case revolutionized law enforcement in the United Kingdom, changed the very foundations of British law, got rid of the protection against double jeopardy, which used to be like one of those foundations of Anglo-Saxon law. Now it's gone just because of this case. Now, remember this when they say, oh, Henry Nowak's death was a tragedy, but it's one thing. Don't use it to divide us. Nonsense. No one thinks that. One crime decades ago changed the entire way they police in the UK. They made a holiday for this kid. They made his mom a baroness and put her in the House of Lords. Don't give me this. In fact, Parliament got a report just a few years ago complaining that the police have not done enough after Stephen Lawrence's death. And keep in mind here, it wasn't police misconduct that led to Lawrence's death. It's not like they called him a liar as the kid died, as they did here. He was just murdered. But apparently all British society was to blame. Now, this report was called the Macpherson Report 22 years on. The Macpherson Report was the sprawling document after the case that recommended all sorts of changes to police work in the UK to increase trust and confidence in policing amongst minority ethnic communities, their term. Now, what does that mean? You need more of them to get hired. It said police should be representative of the communities they serve, and that targets should be set for recruitment, progression, and retention of minority ethnic police officers, unquote. Now, you hear this kind of thing all the time, but what does it really mean? Break it down. It means that race matters, and you can only expect people of their own race to police their own race. Wouldn't the logical conclusion of that suggest maybe multiculturalism and multiracialism is a bad idea? Well, no, because we know these things don't apply to white people. Again, white people have no identity. Everybody else has government-mandated privileges protecting their collective identities. This is how it works. What else do you have to do if you're serious about this? You can't have racial disparities in crime. You can't have racial disparities in law enforcement with things like stop and search. The report said despite the serious concerns raised and recommendations made in the Macpherson Report and other reports since, the disproportionality is greater now than it was 22 years ago, unquote. Yeah, why? Because they commit more crime. That's why. You think they weren't thinking about this for 22 years? But the reality is the reality. So of course you're going to search these people more. But here's the thing. If you actually do that, if you enforce the law, you're going to get more disparities. So what is the political necessity? To not show disparities. So what are you going to do? If you're a police officer on the beat and you come across something, you are not going to look into crimes from certain people. You are not going to punish crimes by certain people. That is what you are incentivized to do. What else do you need to do? You need to confront so-called institutional racism within the police department itself. In a section entitled Racism and the Police 22 Years On, we are told Quote, the McPherson report found that racism was an important factor in the failure of the Metropolitan Police investigation into Stephen Lawrence's murder. It concluded that the problems it found amounted to institutional racism and highlighted racism at both individual and institutional level. Our inquiry has found that policing today is very different from 22 years ago, and there have been important and welcome improvements in policing since the McPherson report was published, including on the policing of racist and hate crimes, the commitment of senior officers to promoting diversity and equality, and good examples of local community policing. However, we have also found persistent, deep-rooted, and unjustified racial disparities in key areas, unquote. It's always the same story, right? We've done this and we did that, but we have so much farther to go. Perhaps more importantly, we're not allowed to look into what those disparities actually are about. And if you're tempted to say, oh, well, they're just going for equal treatment, the report continues soon afterward, quote, we found that there has been an increased focus within policing on race and equality since the murder of George Floyd by a police officer in the USA in 2020, which shone a spotlight on race and justice across the world. The committee recommends a comprehensive review and overhaul of police training on racism, diversity, and equality, led by the College of Policing and supported by the Home Office, so that training in the future explicitly focuses on anti-racism, including seeking to reduce differences in experience and outcomes by racial and ethnic group, unquote. Oh, an individual case doesn't have any larger meaning. Stop dividing us. Apparently, an individual case in another country requires changing policing in this country. And think about what this means in terms of incentives. You're a cop. You're a white cop. You're a white cop in Britain for some God knows reason. It's the end of your career if you show institutional racism. And you know this. You've been through anti-racism training. In fact, that's central to your job now, according to your bosses. And if you're a white guy, you're already in trouble because the institutions openly acknowledge that they are looking to replace you with non-whites, because that's what it means to be privileged somehow. So you come across the scene. What do you see? A non-white guy is saying this white guy was being racist. How exactly are you incentivized to respond? If you don't take that claim seriously, it's national news. It's your job, it's your chief's job, it's your partner's job, it's everything. Look what happened to Derek Chauvin for just following ordinary police procedure. Look what happened to some of the other officers in the George Floyd case who were just there. Some of whom didn't even touch George Floyd. They still went to prison. You better believe you need to show deference to these non-whites because they own you. And you know it. And they know it. Which is why they are bringing up the charge of racism so eagerly. It gives them power in this situation. So what are you going to do? This is the key. These guys were not acting irrationally. You're going to arrest the guy accused of racism. You're going to carefully inquire if the non-white is hurt, as they did. You'll check on the white kid later, if at all. But you don't really need to worry about him. You don't call him sir. You don't treat him with dignity. He's just mate. He doesn't have a community. He doesn't matter. He doesn't have a political lobby. He doesn't matter. He doesn't count. And hell, if you're a non-white police officer, you don't have to treat the white kid fairly at all. After all, the whole reason you were hired is just to look after your own group. So what do you end up with? Two-tier policing, two-tier law enforcement. Nigel Farage, of all people, said it very well.
Silence. Proof, if ever there was any, that we're living in a two-tier culture in this country where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities.
And Farage is not the guy, right? In terms of a nationalist leader. I know what you're thinking. I'm thinking it too, but nothing to disagree with there. And he's pointing this out. He's pointing out that white lives matter too. What is the response from the Conservative Party, from the Tories? Kemi Badenoch, this random Nigerian woman who for some reason leads the Tories in the UK, thinks even Farage is too much. So from ITV, we get this article. Badenoch says, making people angry, wrong response to Henry Nowak murder. Quote, Kemi Badenoch said whipping people up and making them angry is not the correct response to the stabbing and arrest of teenager Henry Nowak. The comments by the Conservative Party leader come after Nigel Farage issued a statement about the case on Tuesday, suggesting that we are living in two-tier Britain where the rights and privileges of white people matter less than those of ethnic minorities. It is making me angry because that's not how we solve this. That's not how we solve this. We can't solve it by whipping people up. We can't solve it by making them angry, Badenoch said on Good Morning Britain on Tuesday. Nigel Farage is taking sides. I'm not taking sides. I'm saying enough of this. We need to stop this racializing of our society. We are multiracial, yes, but we need to stop using race as a way of defining laws. Let's treat everyone equally." Unquote. There's your boomer catnip, boomer conservative catnip for the day. Here's the problem. One, getting angry is the only way you get change in a democracy. The people who say, "Oh, let's just get along with everyone," they're going to get steamrolled. And at this point, if someone on your side is saying, "Oh, civility, being nice," they're saying because they don't care if your side gets steamrolled. This is Mike Pence talking about civility or something. No one is taking it seriously. And two, more importantly, once you have multiculturalism or multiracialism, especially multiracialism, it's going to be in the laws. It's inevitable. Why? Because the groups that are more ethnocentric will have more power. And they're going to use that power, and they're going to put it in the laws. How are you going to stop that? Why do Sikhs have a magical right to carry their special knives? Because they mobilized for it. And even if you don't, and this goes back to like right-wing libertarian days, let's do a thought experiment. You have a basic problem. Let's pretend for just a second. Progressives today say colorblindness, so-called, is in fact racist. So already, you're going to be dealing with insane conflict if you have diversity at all. But let's ignore that for a second. If you had somehow, as conservatives always say they want, a society where race didn't matter in the law, where everything somehow was enforced perfectly equally by agents of the state, the bureaucrats and the cops, if you had some perfectly colorblind society, what would it look like? What would happen? You're going to have the same discrepancies in academic performance, in income, in crime, and social dysfunction. Why? Because race exists and racial differences matter. So you're going to get a racially stratified society. And at that point, you have two choices. You can either say race exists, and if you want to live in a free society, you're going to have to deal with inequality, which non-whites are not going to do, and ambitious politicians who want to use them as a political base are not going to go along with. Or you can say the only possible explanation for this inequality is racism. And to fix the racism, we need to go back to setting up special protections and law enforcement and education and jobs and everything else. And then we are right back where we started. This isn't new. This is not up for debate, man. Every single Western country has been trying the same program. Every single Western country is ending up with the same results. Diversity doesn't work. It can't work. And those pushing it on us know it was never supposed to work. This is reality. What happened to Henry Nowak was not a one-off. It is the logical conclusion of a system working the way it was designed to do. The purpose of a system is what it does, and the agents of the state holding us down as we bleed to death at the hands of foreigners is what the system is supposed to do. This is our entire civilization right now. That's the entire history of the post-war world in a picture. That's it, right there. That's all you need to know. Rupert Lowe, MP of Restore Britain, posted the following in response to the case, and it is worth quoting the whole thing. He said, quote, "How many more young British men and women are going to die, bleeding in the street, alone and terrified, cuffed, in a pool of their own blood, begging for help? How many more parents are going to stand there and say they couldn't help their children in their dying moments, apologizing to their dead children because they couldn't stop it from happening? How many more? This is going to happen again and again and again. It's happening right now in every city across the country. Rape, sexual torture, even worse, mass industrial abuse of British children. Henry Nowak is one of thousands and thousands and thousands. Innocent young men and women put through the most unimaginable pain because our country has failed to do what needs to be done. Because children have been sacrificed to death in order to appease foreign cultures that have no place in our country. I have had enough of all of it. I am going to look back in anger. I urge you all to do the same." Yeah. So do I. A society that sacrifices its own children in the name of some twisted xenophile creed should not survive, and it won't. But let's hear no rhetoric, especially from Americans, about Britain is dead, Britain is conquered. No. These people are held down by a system that not only poisons them with guilt and self-hatred, but real repression. like the armed agents of the state preventing you from defending yourself, consciously and deliberately enforcing policies that are leading the British people to their own destruction. But the fate of the English people is still in their hands. They have alternatives. They have champions stepping forward. They have a movement. They have a solution in the form of remigration and other measures. So let this be a rallying cry, not more defeatism. Henry Nowak is dead, but frankly, we're past the point where we say he was just an individual. And I don't care who tells me I have to believe that. He was all of us. And he was put in that situation because of his racial identity, which is the only thing that mattered to those with power. That's why anger in defense of our common identity is the only proper response. He is a martyr, and like most martyrs in history, I suspect, he never intended to be, but that doesn't matter. His family doesn't want him to be. That doesn't matter. The regime in London made him one. He's dead, but England is not, as long as the will to resist is still there. England lives and marches on. Hey guys, quick reminder before we continue. You can follow Identity Politics on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, and TikTok. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, sign up for our email list. If you believe in this work and you want to help us stay fully independent, you can support us directly on Ko-Fi. We offer bronze, silver, gold, and white membership tiers, or you can give a one-time contribution, whatever works for you. Every bit of support helps fund production, research, and our ability to speak freely without corporate or platform pressure. All the links are in the description below. Now back to the show. My guest today needs little introduction. Colin Robertson, Millennial Woes, has been one of the most important voices in our sphere. On his Substack, he has a new article, a great breakdown of this entire case, which I encourage all you guys to check out. It's the kind of reporting that if we had a real media, we would get this from them, but of course we don't. So it's left to people like him, and I hope you guys can support him. It's a real pleasure to welcome back to the show one of the movement's most important voices, Millennial Woes. Check it out. So Millennial Woes returns to Identity Politics. Thank you so much for being here. And I got to say, you've written the single best timeline of anyone that I've seen about this case. Can't thank you enough for doing the research here. You would think that the mainstream media would do it, but of course they don't particularly want to tell us what actually happened, do they?
No, definitely not. Thank you for the compliment about the essay. It was a lot of work. I spent about 5 days researching it obsessively. Also, the legalities around the Sikh dagger, the kirpan. There's an awful lot to it. There's lots of different
I suppose
areas.
We can start with that because, I mean, not to get lost in the details right away, but I feel like it's important. There's a lot of dispute as to whether he even used the kirpan, and they're saying, oh, no, it was actually this other one. But as you pointed out, and I don't think I've seen anybody else point this out, he was part of an order where he has to carry 2 knives, correct? So there was technically, I mean, he would say there's a religious reason why he had 2 knives, including this larger blade that I think he committed the act with.
That's right. And I've been doing research on the British newspaper archives, and this has always been a problem for since at least the mid '60s. The first article I found about it was then people, but as far as I know, nobody has ever actually, like a white guy, has not been killed with a kirpan before, or any sort of Sikh ceremonial dagger until now. This seems to be the first time it's happened, as far as my research has revealed. I don't want to say definitively that this has never happened before, but if it has, I couldn't find it in the archives. But people were always worried about it and suspicious, because it is rather strange to see a guy just carrying a huge knife around, a dagger, a sword. It's kind of weird. It's kind of unusual. So people were perturbed. But in those articles from 50 years ago, 40 years ago, and so on, the word kirpan is used to refer to like an 8-inch, 10-inch sword. But now,
pretty sizable sword, yeah.
Today, the modern articles all say that a kirpan is a small, like 3-inch blade. So that's what they're referring to when they use the word kirpan. Meantime, there's the word shastar, which just means any sort of bladed weapon. And then there's also pesh cabs, which seems to be like a more specifically what this was, what the weapon was. So, in modern parlance, Vikram Singh Digwa had a small kirpan around his neck, which was completely irrelevant to the incident, and a 8-inch Pej caps. And this is an example of how suddenly, when one of these news events happens, suddenly we've all got to become familiar with stuff that we never even heard of before.
Right. These strange folkways of people in your country.
I had never heard of these words before until now. Although I even remember, I do remember when the London riots happened in 2011, I remember people saying they won't, like the rioters, blacks, won't attack the Sikh temples because they've got swords. And people thought it was sort of based. People thought it was impressive. It was cool that they've got swords so they can defend themselves. And this is why, people are saying that it should be banned. Ban the kirpan and all the others, the variants of it. I think it would be better if we were all, instead of, basically I think that we should all be able to carry these things. If they are, then so should everyone else. I don't think, rather than remove their freedom, I think everyone else should be given that freedom as well.
Right, I agree. I mean, especially like I did a whole thing the last time. I think I've even got it still here somewhere. About how the Anglo-Saxons are named after the axe. I mean, they're named after this weapon. And you can imagine a case where somebody would say, no, this is core to my identity. Maybe he comes up with some sort of ancestral Anglo-Saxon paganism or something to give it a religious thing and say, no, this is what I should be allowed to do. But no British court, no British politician would take such a claim seriously. It would just be dismissed out of hand. But yet these other kind of fanciful claims from a population that shouldn't even be in the country, I think Keir Starmer even said today, like, we're not going to do this ban. They've rejected out of hand already the idea that they should even be held to the same standard as everybody else.
I don't know if Keir Starmer said it. Maybe he did, but I definitely know that some Labour. I saw a thing on the newspaper's website that some Labour politician has said that. Some cabinet politician has said that. But Keir Starmer, I mean, he is the most. I don't need to go into that, but this ban. You see, the thing is, again, in the newspaper archives, you see that Sikhs organised vociferously against any restriction on this right, and at first they didn't officially have the right to. I mean, it was mostly tolerated informally, but sometimes one of them would be arrested for it, and then in 1988. That was done away with. It was made officially in law that they're allowed to do this. But interestingly, that law doesn't actually name Sikhism. And no one seems to have done this research. The 1988 law and the 2019 law, which superseded it, neither of them actually mention Sikhism. It just says a religious exemption for if your religion has this obligation, has this requirement of you. But the thing is that only Sikhism has that requirement. So in theory, there are, and also there's another exemption, which is if you've got a good reason to be carrying this blade around with you. So if you're a fisherman, for example, or if you're doing DIY, etc., then that's a defense. And maybe the police wouldn't even arrest you for it. They would just ask, what have you got that for? And you would explain. But I've forgotten where I was going with this.
But the question is, like, why do they have this right that nobody else has? And why has there been no pressure against it at this point? Because as you point out, this is the first time that you've probably seen murder like this. And this does seem to be the government approved reaction, because whenever something bad happens, there's always like, well, what do we do about it? And somehow what we do about it is ban stuff for everybody else. And I saw that his parents or his father was saying, we don't want this to be taken up about race. The real problem is knives. So we need to do more against knife crime. But the thing is, of course, they've pretty much already done everything that can be done with knife crime, except for the Sikhs, of course. I mean, the Sikhs would have to get banned. But if we've already dismissed that out of hand, what exactly is anyone supposed to do?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the ultimate, what this should really lead to is we start incentivizing Sikhs to leave Britain. That would be the ideal. because obviously there are different people from us. We never wanted them here in the first place. So that's what should happen. And when people talk about banning the Kirpan, I'm supported purely for that reason, that it would incentivize these people to leave of their own accord. That'd be great.
Right. You need the Saxons to be allowed to carry knives, but the Kirpan is banned. That's actually the correct position.
Exactly. I don't when I hate seeing this. It should be one rule for everyone. One law for everyone. Why?
No.
Why? This is our land. This is our homeland. We should have more rights than them. It's ridiculous to say that you want to be on a par with someone who's just arrived here 5-10 years ago. Why?
Right.
Why don't you want more rights than them? Of course, you should have more rights than them.
If they like Khalistan so much, they can go use their Kirpans to fight for Khalistan. I mean, this isn't our problem.
Exactly. But one thing I did find in the archives that was quite interesting was that, I mean, you can convert to Sikhism. And in 1973, a white guy was actually
see where this is going.
A white guy was arrested for carrying. He was a convert to Sikhism, and he got arrested for carrying this sword. And he got let off, but the judge said that he should carry a smaller sword in future. And then 10 years later, a black guy who'd converted to Sikhism got same thing. But it's amazing.
These are some hilarious implications.
Yeah, I know. Well, they don't need an excuse.
Yeah, right.
They're in a gang or something. So yeah, it's not strictly racial, although in practice, 99% of the time, Sikhs are brown, so it is racial. But yeah, the whole situation is clearly perverse. It's ridiculous that they have a right which the vast majority of us don't have. It's obviously ridiculous. But the thing is that, as I said earlier about the riots in 2011, for most people up until now, if they even knew about this, they thought it was kind of cool because nothing bad had ever come of it yet. But now that has happened. So now loads of people know about this legal exemption and the Kirpan itself and the swords, whatever, the pesh cabs, and they're annoyed. They're angry, understandably. But as I say, I think the better solution, well, there is two things. Deport them, and we should have the same rights to have that. That's what should happen here.
One of the things that people have been talking about, I think Rupert Lowe made this point explicitly, when you talk about deportation, is some will say, oh, well, it's this individual crime. And it's like, but it's not an individual crime because new charges, I think, have actually just been brought today against other members of the murderer's family. Because now that you have this conviction, it's not just that, oh, he stabbed this guy and then he went to his family. It's that the family helped conceal the crime. And there was some dispute, as you point out in your excellent article, about whether the brother knew the full score. He may have been lied to or just didn't understand the full situation. So maybe he didn't lie. But it seems pretty clear at this point that the mom did some stuff she wasn't supposed to be doing. And now there are some other things going on. So really you have this whole situation where you have a community that's just sort of takes for granted, oh, one of ours did something wrong. How can we help them get away with it? I mean, this is the flip side of that third world family values that like Tucker Carlson was praising not too long ago. Unfortunately, this is what it actually looks like.
Yes, it looks like a complete breakdown of law and order because nobody is adhering to the abstract principles of truth and justice. It's my brother.
Me against my brother, me and my brother against the cousin. Yeah, right.
All of that. And so in practice, what that amounts to is this is just a white guy. Whatever our brother has done to him, we've got to support, help him get away with it. Now, I think it was 2 days later when they were on, the two brothers were being driven to the police station for questioning, interrogation. The police secretly recorded them. And I didn't actually know that was legal. I thought the police weren't allowed to do that.
I was pretty shocked when I saw that.
Yeah, they did it. And that was when the killer, Vikram, told his brother that he had stabbed Henry Nowak. And until then, I think the brother didn't actually know. But the brother's first reaction was to say, you should say it was in self-defense.
Right. Right.
The first reaction, I mean, okay, you can say that the brother was acting in naivety up until then. He didn't know the truth. But as soon as he was told the truth,
right.
his first reaction was lie. I mean, this is what we're dealing with. I mean, I shouldn't laugh. I know it's not funny. This is very, very serious.
You got to laugh to keep from screaming or crying or going insane or converting to Sikhism and running around with a sword, because that's clearly like the appropriate response here.
Exactly. So then there are two big elements to it. That the first is the law and the Karpan, and then the Sikhs. The second part of it is the police, and that I think has dominated the outrage about this story. It's how the police behaved. And there was an interesting summary done by a policeman he was posted it on Twitter of all the things that the police did wrong. I should say that the body cam footage was released last night, and I had just published my essay. So I then had to
go back and do it.
Yeah, this is the problem with covering current affairs. I then had to spend most of last night feverishly revising the essay and based on what the body cam footage revealed, which of course is why the body cam footage should have been released in the first place. Because even I, who was researching it as carefully as I could, even I got the wrong impression about some things. So they should have released it immediately, and they should release all of the footage. They've only released 3 minutes of one policeman's body cam footage. Mm-hmm. They should release the whole thing and the other police officers' footage, and especially the footage from the mobile phones of both the victim and the killer. But I don't think that will be released just because of gore reasons, and possibly also family dignity. But it really would be useful to know to see that stuff. So a policeman wrote this summary of all the things that they did wrong, and you see it in the footage. It's only 3 minutes. I'm not a trained policeman, right? So if I arrived at that, and I want to be careful about this,
right?
The racial element is another thing. I want them all deported. That goes without saying. But within that, though, I want to be careful about being truthful. So I'm not a trained police officer. If I were to arrive as a layman at that scene, what would I do? How quickly would I realize that something was seriously wrong with Henry Nowak? It would probably be as soon as I was told he has a mouthful of blood.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a trained policeman. I don't know anything about medicine or whatever, but I do know that if you have a mouthful of blood, that's indicative of a severe
internal injury.
Right. And the policeman was told that immediately upon arriving.
Yeah.
Before he'd even seen, it was. I think it was that the father was propping Nowak up, and he said to the policeman, "I'm just holding him up because he keeps falling, and he's got a mouthful of blood." That was the first thing the police officer was told upon arriving. From that point on, it should have been, okay, what's wrong with him?
Right.
But instead, it was this faffing around, asking the killer if he'd been injured as well, and then doubting the victim's pleas for help. And also the Sikh family had obviously concocted this thing that, and this wasn't mentioned anywhere else until the body cam footage came out. I didn't know about this. They'd obviously concocted a thing that, yes, he's hurt, but it was from falling from that. It was when he jumped over that fence.
Right.
It wasn't. So it's just it doesn't really change anything, but it's an interesting detail that they did acknowledge from the start that he was hurt, that he was, and indeed the police officer said, "Is anyone else injured?" So injury, it was there from the start. They were aware of it, but they weren't thinking it was an internal thing, which they should have been, because he had a mouthful of blood.
Mouthful of blood, yeah. And especially when you hear the way because we all kind of hear the I can't breathe from every, I mean, you do anything to a black guy now. He's, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Hey, put that down. You stole that. I can't breathe. It's like, what are you talking about? You're just standing there. This is just what they say now. And it's always done kind of this performative way. But in this case, what really struck me is how desperate he sounded when because he wasn't screaming it because he couldn't scream. He had no air. He was just kind of gasping, can't breathe, like the way you would if you were dying. And this made no impression. And it was just like, put your hand in the cuff, mate.
Yeah.
Like,
it's
an insane reaction.
Yeah. The handcuffing is especially egregious because there was clearly absolutely no need to do that. He was not going to get up and run away. He wasn't going to get aggressive. That couldn't be more obvious. So even if you didn't think he's about to die, it's very obvious there's no need to handcuff him. But they did it anyway. They did it immediately. I mean, it's right. It's just mind-boggling. And
they didn't even know the story yet. It was just some guy recounting like, oh, I was attacked. And it's like, oh, here's a man with a story. Let's see what the other guy has to say. Like, they didn't even hear him out. They just immediately handcuffed. And then, of course, the only thing he did say was basically in so many words, I'm dying. And they were just like, well, we don't care.
I've been stabbed. I can't breathe. And he said those, I think he said I can't breathe 9 times. And he said, I've been stabbed 4 times, if I recall that.
Right.
And yet it just seems to fall on deaf ears. And the officer very lazily lifts his shirt just a few inches just to see has he been stabbed. And that's all. That's literally all the checking that he does. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I find it absolutely astonishing. I don't know what else to say about it.
I guess what's really
conduct.
Right. And what's really remarkable about it is just because you understand how police can get jaded, certainly. I mean, you have to keep this in mind every time something goes wrong, where police are dealing with just lunatics all the time. And, how many ridiculous claims do we hear, which are obviously nonsense? You arrest a guy. Of course, he has some sob story about blah, blah, blah. And eventually you just get turned off to this forever. But in this case, it's just a bizarre reaction because you would think there were so many times where you would think they would pick up on the idea that something is wrong. Like the idea of handcuffing the guy before you even hear his account. We all seen in that picture how pale his hands were. Obviously indicative of blood loss. I mean, this is not anyone, even without any medical training, you're going to notice this. You're going to notice something is wrong. The way he's talking, the fact that, again, not just the blood in the mouth, but that the murderer's father is saying he can't stand up and he keeps falling over. Well, if he keeps falling over, right. Yeah. So if that's the case, then something is obviously wrong. You would think that you would check on it. Meanwhile, even if you were determined to arrest this guy, even if you were determined to take statements and do whatever else, the murderer's not going anywhere. He's just standing right there. So wouldn't you focus all your attention on the one who was obviously seriously injured? And yet it was almost like the idea of paying attention to this kid, I don't know, outraged him in some way. Like the tone of the officer is just so jocular and contemptuous. Like he thinks this is the funniest thing he's ever seen.
Yeah, it's like it's anathema to them to care about this white kid. And there's one bit. It's very difficult to follow all the dialogue, and some of it's just unintelligible from other people. But at one point, Nowak says, "I've been stabbed," or the police officer says, "Where do you think you've been stabbed?" And the killer says he hasn't been stabbed, or he's not stabbed. And the policewoman says, "Yeah, I know, but we've got to check."
Yep, I caught that. Yeah, and then of course, also at the end, you have the only time the thing cuts off is when you have the person go, oh, we're shining a light in his eyes. Yeah. But even his pupils aren't responding. Yes, and only then is it a problem. Right.
And that's at the very end. It's annoying that they cut that's where the clip ends, which is really annoying.
Which is probably why they did it, because I think that was the point they realized, oh, wait, we screwed up. Because if his pupils aren't responding to light, you've got a serious situation.
Very serious, yeah. As far as I know, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's dead, but it's extremely serious. That's what I know, what I've been told. So yeah, that seems to be when they realized, and by then they'd been there for 3 minutes, right. And looking at him for well, more than 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, mostly making fun of him, it seemed like to me.
Making fun of him. And I think the main thing is his voice. I mean, he just sounds awful. And he must have looked awful. They've pixelated his face so you can't see. And I don't know why they've done that. I mean, maybe that's some family
law,
dignity.
maybe, who knows? Yeah, right.
I don't know. But interestingly, like the mother, the killer's mother, her face isn't pixelated. She's the one person who isn't pixelated. And the killer himself.
Right.
But I don't know why they did that with Nowak. But you can't see what he looked like. Now, we know that he had a cut to his face, a slash with that sword, but we don't know how big it was. But even just the presence of a slash should have immediately told them a knife is involved here.
Right. You don't get that from falling off a fence. That wouldn't make any sense.
Exactly. It must look like a clean cut. It's obviously a blade. So they should have known. Again, they should have known that instantly. So I don't know. I just don't know what they're training these police with. And
anti-racism. I mean, that's actually what they're training them in. That's actually what they're training them with them. It's because they're being trained in anti-racism. So therefore, that's the only thing they're going to respond to.
Yeah, there was something I saw on Twitter a few hours ago. I didn't save it. It's so often the way that something pops up, you don't save it, and then you need it later. And it was someone had found DEI training that specifically this police force had done last year, and it said it was about equitable treatment and DEI, racial sensitivity means that we don't treat everyone the same. Equal treatment is not the goal.
Right. Color blindness is in itself racism. But of course, the discriminatory treatment is then described as equal opportunity. I mean, that's the way it's always been played out here.
Yeah. Yeah. So this stuff is in Britain now as well. I mean, I think it's been in America for some time. About when was that first? Was that in the late 80s that this idea about color blindness is racism? I think that was maybe the late 80s.
I mean, when I was younger, they were still going with the color blindness as anti-racism, but that was just kind of, the basic stuff you get in elementary school or something like that.
Right.
I think it really only stepped up with Obama once you had the idea of institutional racism as being something that is very important. And because ultimately what they did is once you basically had color blindness, which you more or less had officially by the 90s, accepting affirmative action and things like that, of course, but you still basically had the same racial differences. So you have to explain it somehow. Institutional racism, the invisible knapsack of white privilege and all the rest of it. Yeah. Given all that, and of course in Britain, I mean, after the Stephen Lawrence murder, I mean, they basically did the same thing. I mean, that was what, 1993, I think, the Lawrence murder. And so they basically...
The timeline is the 1981 Brixton riots. There was a report done on that, the Scarman report, like 82, something like that, which... officially, that was the first time that multiculturalism was recommended as the policy of the police force. It should now be, this is how we should now be policing the country, multicultural. Stephen Lawrence was killed in 93, and at first there wasn't a big furore about that. And I don't know how it happened, but it was over about 2 or 3 years. It became a huge story, a huge scandal. And I think that was probably manufactured. I don't know if he was a drug dealer, Stephen Lawrence. I have no idea. But I don't think that they killed him for racial reasons. I think that story was manufactured after the fact. And then that resulted in the Macpherson report, which was, I think, 1999. And that was which said that the British police force is institutionally racist.
Right.
Which was a huge turning point. And ever since then, the British police has been reinvented, or drastically overhauled, so as to escape that charge at any cost.
And of course, anti-racism is a core part of their training at this point. I mean, they talked about, there was a follow-up report in Parliament a couple years back, but it was after 2020. And, the usual thing, we've come so far, but we have so much farther to go, blah, 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 blah. And what are they talking about? We need to have more non-whites. We need to make sure we don't have disparate impact with things like stop and search. But also, we need to make sure that anti-racism is a core part of training. And, of course, they reference George Floyd and everything else. So now you're bringing in things that happen in America to reflect how British police should actually act as if it's the same institution, as if the issues matter in the same places. And the other thing, too, is when you look at this case, it seems like only now are they filing all these other charges. Now, maybe that's a legal requirement. Maybe you need like a crime proven before you can do other things. But now it's almost like the establishment is pretty frantic. I mean, now they're filing all these things. They're releasing the body cam footage. You got Keir Starmer out there denying that there's two-tier police, saying, of course, that isn't true, and everything else. Are you surprised that they even got this conviction? Because now, frankly, given what I know of the British justice system, I'm surprised they didn't just like let the kid off with a slap on the wrist. I mean, that seems to be how they handled these things.
I mean, it was also a surprise when Kyle Rittenhouse was acquitted. You know, I was expecting. I think it just depends on the judge. I think it really hinges on the judge, maybe, and the barrister. His prosecution lawyer was that incompetent Jew, if I recall correctly, and whereas the judge was this old school, kind of guy, and otherwise it could have gone in a very different way, that trial, and I suspect it's the same with this one. I think it just depends on who ends up getting the trial, the case.
The arbitrary nature of all this stuff is so terrifying because, I mean, it could happen to any one of us in terms of getting caught up in it.
And it's just the luck of the draw about which judge you get. I didn't know about these other charges. The first time I heard, like, the ones that are now being levied against the relatives and the killer himself, which are weapons charges. Now, he had already been convicted last Thursday of possessing a bladed weapon in public for the Pesh cabs, the sword that was actually used in the killing. So I thought that was covered. But for some reason, they're now doing him again and his relatives for some sort of weapons charge. And I didn't know about this until a few hours ago, so otherwise I would have mentioned it in the essay. I suspect it's for the collection of weapons that he had at home. I don't know what else it would be. But there might be more to come that we just don't know about yet.
It was for weapons that they had at home. They were talking about how there was this whole thing of various weapons. And of course, as you pointed out in your article, this guy was obsessed with weapons. His own temple apparently was like, all right, this guy's a little crazy because he had been brandishing it around. His brother had apparently got in trouble for a weapon, although his brother seems a little less unhinged as far as this stuff goes. And then you noted something that he'd even trained with bladed weapons for a while. I don't know what exactly that entails with those kinds of swords, but who knows?
Yeah, he'd been training since the age of 12. So with these, so that's 11 years of training he'd had by this time. So yeah, I don't know what they're. The thing is, he's got 21 years in jail, it's a life sentence with a minimum of 21 years. People are saying he'll be out in 5 months and all that. I don't think so. I think he will serve it. I'd be surprised, very surprised, if he gets out within 21 years. Frankly, I suspect he'll be in there for the rest of his life. The rest of his family, I don't know. His mother's going to be sentenced in July, and again, these new charges will add to everything. So right now, it's still an evolving story, and I do kind of wish that I'd waited a while longer before publishing the essay, because people will see the original thing and they won't see the revised text, because why would they look at it? So yeah, but I want to keep the essay as accurate as possible, so I will continually revise it with whatever new information comes out. Hopefully, as I said, there'll be more footage released, because that really is invaluable. It's very, very useful. Yeah.
Are you surprised by the reaction of, because obviously we're all pretty critical of him, and some of the things he's said and done over the years, is Nigel Farage actually coming out and saying White Lives Matter, and White Lives Matter 2, I should say, and denying and condemning two-tier law enforcement and everything else. Of course, the Tories are now attacking Farage as going too far for saying this. The Tories are saying, like, oh, actually, race shouldn't matter in law. It's like, okay, but, it kind of does. And it's required. Yeah, we're required to have it count. And Rupert Lowe, of course, is obviously taking a strong stance, but no surprise there.
Yeah. As for Nigel Farage, I just wouldn't trust him an inch. I think that, I saw some people were getting excited on Twitter that he's come out with a hard line about this. I don't care. I don't believe that he intends to do anything. He certainly doesn't get the racial angle. He's a civic nationalist. And I don't think that people should vote for him, because I don't think he has any intention of solving the problem. I don't think he has the stomach for it. I don't think he actually cares. But I think he's quite good at pretending to care. He's a very good speaker, and he can be very convincing. But he's ultimately a showman. So I don't get excited about him saying things at all. I just think that this is going to add to the reasons for people to vote for Restore. I think it'll just bolster their case that this country, certainly the police, the media, which largely ignored this case until yesterday, and to some extent the judiciary, is corrupt. It's massively corrupt.
Are you surprised they even got this far, though? I mean, because what they're going to say, the establishment line is going to be, people say two-tier justice and everything else, but justice was served in this case, and therefore everything should be fine. So why are you guys complaining? I mean, you can already see that coming, and especially when they're filing these new charges. I mean, I would say probably the reason they're doing this is in response to public outcry, which, of course, supports the idea that the only way you can get justice is through public outcry.
Yeah, and also the police conduct investigation is going on, that's really going to be important. But I'm surprised it's been going on for 6 months now, nearly 7 months. And how long does it take? And they're analysing all the body cam footage, So I don't understand why they've not concluded yet. But apparently when they do, their report is going to be published, it's going to be made public. Thank God, because I think this really needs to be addressed. I think the British public need to know what happened there that night, why did it happen, and how can it be prevented from happening again? Because we don't want the same thing happening to us, to our sons, our brothers, our nephews. And right now it feels like, well, it could happen to any of us. It could happen to absolutely any of us. We could get knifed, and then the police show up and don't believe us and sympathize with our killer. I mean, it's just terrifying.
Do you think, I mean, this is kind of the great question, because you look at, let's say, the grooming gangs being the most famous example. I mean, at all these different points, you had people who were in city councils, people in police, people who were labor MPs and things like that, where they knew about it. And yet their immediate reaction was not outrage or even concern. It was more just like, well, how can we keep this from being a big deal? How can we make sure whites don't get mad about this? We got to make sure that these minority communities are safeguarded. Even today, there's some Sikh MP who's giving an indignant speech. It was literally the last thing I saw before I jumped on here, about how evil it is that people are attacking his community over the actions of one person, and how we need to do more we actually need to do more in response to this to protect Sikhs. They need more rights. They need more privileges, because now they're oppressed.
Yeah, they've always been very forthright, as I said earlier, about with the Kirpan in the 70s and 80s, they were very good at organising, very good at protesting, very good at fighting their case. So it doesn't surprise me that they're doing that now, and you can see it in real time that they're doing that. But then I also think, well, of course they're going to do that, but it's not surprising. It's human nature. They want to protect their kind.
But that's my
culture, their religion.
Right.
For me, it's just all the more evidence that they just shouldn't be living here.
They shouldn't be here, right?
The solution is, you've got your own countries, your own parts of the world, and integrating you here, accommodating you here, is onerous for us, and occasionally murderous for us. Now, it is very occasional, but once is kind of enough. That's kind of bad enough, especially because as diversity increases and as multiculturalism increases and as the hold of the white majority decreases over its culture, its policing, its judiciary, its media, this kind of thing is only going to become more likely to happen. But because of course it will.
Right.
So the dynamics I mean, this is the dynamics of diversity and multiculturalism. Basically, it means that the host group, the formerly majority group, basically gets eaten alive in terms of its prestige, its power, its wealth, and its population through miscegenation. So it's not a good deal for the native Brits in any way to accommodate these people, even if we get along with them in the short term. And I would add that most of us do. I mean, most of us don't get murdered by Sikhs. Most of us don't have these experiences. But in the long term, it is doom for us. That's what it means for us. So, yeah, as for politicians, and yeah, of course, their priority is to keep a lid on it and try to minimize the thing.
Do you think that explains it, though? I mean, I guess the indifference to white people who are suffering, because this is like the great mystery. I mean, maybe this is too big, but this is something I just think about a lot, where you see it with like Irina Zarutska when her murals are getting covered up, and they tried to make one in Providence, and the mayor is just like disgusted and outraged and like orders its destruction and everything else. And the same people who will say things to you like, you're not a good human being, you're a bad person because you're not crying over George Floyd, will almost like taunt you over a murder like this. And in fact, there are Sikhs on X right now who are taunting white people, posting, like they're defending this. They're saying this was a good thing.
Celebrating it, yeah.
Right. Why? But you again, you kind of expect that, but like the normal dumpy HR person who you see in an office who like quietly makes sure that like nobody talks about this, the labor counselor who's 100% white, who wants to make sure that these sorts of issues get covered up, the person who's in Ofcom or whatever the communications regulator there says like the top priority here needs to make sure the far right doesn't talk about this. I mean, at this point, going back 20 years, why is there just, and even to the cop who just didn't care about what he was seeing right there when there's a kid bleeding, choking on his own blood, like right before his eyes, and it's pretty friggin' obvious. Why does it not even register to them? I mean, are they just, because I don't think it's just fear or like, I don't want to be called racist. I mean, it's almost like an internalized self-hatred, but that almost seems too flippant. I don't know.
I think it's just that people know that they're playing a social game, and the rules of the game are that you can't be racist. So in order to get ahead, in order to get promoted, in order to get friends, in order to get popularity, you have to say the right things and do the right things and demonstrate the right attitudes all the time. All the time. So that, I think, is what's going on. I mean, I don't know if these, because they were all white, the police officers, I don't know if they saw this and thought, he's just white, fuck him. Or is it simply that they're just obeying protocol, which is there are these Sikhs here, they're quite angry, they're insisting on X, therefore the white guy's saying Y, I'll veer towards X.
Right.
I think that's what probably happened. I don't think they literally wanted him to die or didn't care whether he lived or died. I don't think it's that black and white. But because as soon as they realized that he was ill, they changed completely. So I think we should be careful about it's just less cartoonish than some people are saying that I've seen on Twitter, that they just didn't care about him. It's more that they were obeying a set of rules. A set, like you could say they were obeying their programming, which is quite literally true. And
that is that basically how it's been for a while. I mean, even going with like grooming rings and stuff like that, it's just you just sort of are thinking of your own status. Yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, like since '99. And
do you think we'll see a change then?
I don't know. I do think that this has had a huge effect in terms of upsetting people, angering people. I don't think it will just go away. I think it will be remembered. I think it will certainly have a resurgence if Restore get into power. If they don't, I still think it will linger. I think it's going to be one of those things that just can't be put away. Because I was worried at first that it would just get forgotten. You know, we would just move on and the news cycle would move on and people would just forget about it. because that is human nature. It's happened 1,000 times with different things that have happened. But this one is so massive, and the furore around it is so massive that I think it's going to linger. I think it's going to I think it's permanent. I think it's changed. It's probably, you'll be saying in a year from now, Britain hasn't been the same since then, just like Britain hasn't been the same since the Southport riots in August 24. That was a turning point. And I think this will be as well. And it's turning always in the same direction.
Yeah, right.
Things are getting more and more febrile and precarious. And the government and the whole establishment, the regime, is just incapable of dealing with this emerging climate. There are some people who think that even this is controlled, that even this is orchestrated, and they're having the desired effect on the population. And I simply don't believe that. I think this is I think this is not what the establishment wanted, and I think they're struggling to contain it or even to understand it, really.
Yeah,
but it's something that they brought about.
In the whole model, and correct me if I'm exaggerating, but it seems to me that the whole model of policing in Britain, or maintaining social order, is this almost quasi-imperial approach where you have these different communities and you've got kind of a liaison for each community, and they sort of work with the state, and the goal is to keep community tensions at a manageable point, and you kind of sprinkle around some money to keep everybody happy and everything else. And Britain's not in a civil war, but so they could argue, no, this is working, it's going fine. But the whole thing breaks down once whites start thinking of themselves as a community. And the whole reason I think they're freaking out about this idea of two-tier justice is because the logical implication of, okay, we have a two-tier justice system. Who's the group that gets treated worse off? It's the white people. Therefore, whites are a community. Well, once people start thinking in that way, all bets are off. Like the whole system as set up just like crumples.
The two-tier concept or meme makes it very tangible what the situation is, which is that white people are disadvantaged in their own country, in their own ancestral homeland. So it's sort of like they're terrified of that, the two-tier concept, because it makes it so clear. And I think it removes all the ambiguity. It's just, there it is, that is stark. And they don't want that, because then that is enough for anyone to understand. It's so simple that anyone can get it, grasp it, and then act on it. So, yeah, they're scared about this. But the thing is about the tensions in communities, policing, all of that, the liaison officers, this is just another example of why, even at the best of times, diversity is not a strength, it's a weakness. Because it means that you've got to do all these things just to keep it going, just to maintain equilibrium. You've got to do all these artificial things, which you never needed to do before.
Right.
We didn't need liaison officers 100 years ago. And incidentally, actually, this is quite interesting. The Birmingham, I was doing research for a completely different thing last year, and I discovered that Birmingham got its first liaison officer for the black community within just a couple of 5 years of mass immigration. I think it was 1954 or 55, and at that, that's quick. That's 6 or 7 years after Windrush. And already, even by that time, they realized, oh shit, we need to put in special measures, apparatus to handle this, because they are not integrating and they're never going to integrate. And yeah, indeed. It's been a constant thing, a constant rising thing ever since then, of the mass apparatus that is needed just to maintain equilibrium, let alone to deal with the isolated incidents like this where things go haywire. It's constant tension, constant mistrust, misunderstandings, suspicion, resentment, and loathing. And that, I'm not saying that people of different races constantly loathe each other, because I don't think that's true. On the ground, people get along, as they have to. They avoid each other when they can, but when they meet, it's not always war, right? I want to be clear. I'm not saying that, but just supporting that is all of this background apparatus, not just in the policing, in the welfare, the social services, and of course the government and politics and the media. All of this all of these different bodies have to accommodate the multicultural situation in their own ways, with a 1,000 little projects that we never even hear about, just to keep it stable. And so the idea that this is a strength is absolutely insane. It's a very profound weakness.
Do you think that this may be a little inside baseball, but not probably to a lot of people who are familiar with the movement or who are involved in this and watch the program regularly? The Sikhs were basically Tommy Robinson's model minority. I mean, I saw a clip earlier today, this is from a while back, obviously not in regard to this incident, but he's saying, no, it's if Sikhs came into a place and became the majority population, it's fine. They're integrating, they're British, they're not Islamic, it's perfect. I mean, obviously, that's not looking like a very good take today, not just because you could say the murder is an isolated incident, but from a social perspective, the just instant reaction of the family of how can we help them get away with this? How can we subvert the British justice system? That's the thing that really gives the lie to the idea of integration and says these people aren't integrated at all. Losing you for the sound there.
Oh, sorry. And also that at his temple, they were suspicious of him because of his behavior, and they banned him from the temple. But apparently they didn't tell the police. So he was walking around with a sword in public, and his own co-religionists didn't think to tell the police that we think this guy's crazy. Again, that seems like clannishness to me.
Yeah,
it seems like they're always looking after their own. Now, are they the model minority? No, because
I think we've kind of figured that out about Indians here in America. I mean, you never hear that anymore.
Exactly. I think they're preferable to Muslims for obvious reasons. They're certainly less violent than blacks. But that, I mean, if that's it, if that's not much of a recommendation, is it? It's like
with fake praise,
they're less bad than some of the other groups. I mean, for God's sake, if that's what we're reduced to, then I don't think this has worked out. I just don't see benefiting from it.
Right. I'd rather be punched in the face than shot, but I'd prefer neither of these things happen.
Exactly. Exactly. That was the model attack. You merely punched me. Thank you. No one is ever going to say that. So, are they the model minority? I mean, I think some people kind of find them a bit endearing.
Because in Canada, it's a big thing too.
Because they're not, because they've got the swords, there's that based element, but also they seem sort of harmless teddy bears. I can see why people think, and it's ceremonial clothing and all of that.
Yeah, right.
And I think some people see them in that way, as sort of adorable. Like adorable warriors kind of thing. It's kind of cute. They're like all traditional and all of that. And I think people then take that to mean they're fine. And they're basically, they might as well be European. They're so integrated. They're not. They're not integrated. First of all, racially, so they're never going to be integrated. But second, the very fact that they are culturally and religiously different from us means that they're not integrated, and that there are going to be tensions, but from us towards them, from them towards us, and there are, and that's why the communities largely stay independent of each other and avoid each other whenever they can. And this is how it always is. I mean, there's a photo of the killer. He was working at some accountancy firm early last year, early 2025. They'd taken in a bunch of new recruits, and he was one of them. And everyone else maybe one other guy is brown, but everyone else in this group photo is white. And I thought, they probably, and he's actually standing there with the
I know the photo you're talking about. Yeah, he's got it strapped across his chest, right? Which is bizarre.
In a corporate office environment. And I thought they probably thought, oh, isn't he sort of adorable? These corporate suits, they probably saw him and thought, there's our friendly brown guy, our friendly Sikh. He's fine. He's just like the rest of us. He can use a computer just like the rest of us, and he knows what a spreadsheet is. He's completely westernized. And then he goes and kills someone in the middle of the night, a white guy, and lies about it and gets his family to lie. So it's weird. It's this coexistence, the two things going on at once, where he can be in a corporate, like the ultra-Western, late 20th century kind of thing, where it's cubicles and sterility and rules and protocols and goals and programs, all of that. And then at the same time, he's still living in this highly tribal, clannish, and religious environment. His mind is still there. His heart is still there. Right. And so it gets you to that thing about Kipling's poem about the stranger. You never know when the gods of his foreign lands will repossess his blood. Can't remember the exact wording. But there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, those people in that corporate office probably didn't think he's going to kill someone one day with that sword that's hanging around his waist. But he did.
And it's obviously a bizarre thing. I mean, you can imagine, we're joking about the, I wasn't really joking, but he's talking about like Anglo-Saxons carrying around like daggers or something like that. Imagine a white kid shows up to work. Imagine it was still legal. I mean, forget the legal implications in Britain. But imagine a kid shows up to work and he doesn't just have a dagger on him, but he didn't even have it on the side. I mean, people around here carry knives, but they carry it on the side of their hip, like where you would. He's got it like strapped across his chest in this like crazy showy way. If a white kid showed up to work like that, you'd immediately look at everybody else and say, what the hell's the matter with this guy? Because it's a very bizarre thing to do. You're only doing that to sort of, I don't know, strut about or maybe even vaguely threaten people. But I guess because they're doing it, it's seen as like, oh, isn't that cute?
Yeah. Yeah. And if a white person did it, it would just be immediately, the police would be called.
Right.
At least. I mean, I think that at least they would call security and get him taken out of the building, but probably they would call the police. They'd want the police to know that there's this employee of ours is carrying a sword around. No, it would never happen. The acceptance of it would just never happen. So yeah, it's a very strange situation that we've all been plunged into, and we're meant to celebrate it and enjoy it and think that this makes our lives better. And I just don't think it does. And that's another thing about, because this is what these corporate, I can just imagine what in that office, what they would be thinking is, oh, it's nice. I get to learn about other cultures. And they never actually do. I mean, the extent that they'll learn about other cultures is they might ask him, but even that's awkward to do because he could say you're being racist by asking. But they might ask him about the sword, and he'll explain, yeah, it's part of my religion, blah, blah, blah. And that's it. That's the depth of the learning of other cultures that actually happens with multiculturalism. It's extremely shallow, and doesn't lead to. It's not substantial. It's not bonding,
right?
And it never will be. So about the Sikhs being the model minority, I would emphasize that as far as I would say like
Tommy Robinson kind of claiming them as such. Not me.
It just means that they're less bad than Muslims. It's nonsense. And I would emphasize that as far as I know, this is the first time one of them has killed a white guy with ceremonial dagger. So when people talk about this epidemic of knife crime, I don't like that they're folding this into that.
Right.
Because the epidemic of knife crime is black gangs killing each other in the big cities. That's what that actually is. There are some white gangs still, but it's a small thing. Mostly it's black gangs doing that. It's not Sikhs. This is an isolated incident. But then that doesn't mean that they're the model minority, So it's like both sides are wrong. Tommy Robinson's wrong, and the liberals are wrong, and then the hysterical anti-knife crime people are wrong. Everyone is mischaracterizing it. I don't think that there's an epidemic of Sikh knife crime. If there was, we would have heard about it by now. But this one incident is so awful that it has this a very visceral effect on people, which I think is very understandable. But it's not an epidemic. And so when people talk about changing the laws, making it more difficult, I can understand why they want to do that. But I don't. I think it would be better if we simply reversed reversed multiculturalism. That's ultimately what needs to happen here. We need to reverse mass immigration, and everything else is sort of just papering over the cracks. Because I think if you do ban the Karpan, they'll still have it. Just like you ban guns, but blacks still get guns, et cetera, et cetera. You ban FGM, but they still do it. You know, they always keep doing this stuff. So it's just papering over the cracks. As I don't see, I understand why people want to do it, but I think we need to be thinking in more grander terms than that, basically.
It does seem like a lot of white people kind of fall back on these technocratic solutions. Oh, it's just a question of banning knives, which, frankly, I mean, I hate kind of divisions among Europeans, but you kind of have to in this case. From an American perspective, it just seems like the most insane thing I've ever heard in my entire life. I mean, forget banning guns, but like you can't keep knives out of a prison. How are you possibly going to ban them from a society? It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. The fact that like people don't just immediately break into laughter when this is brought up is just insane to me. But yet, I mean, here you had the victim's father being like, the real problem is knife crime and everything else. And you think about this, but it's like, what else can he say? I mean, leaving aside the question of whether somebody from the government like told him to say that. I know in America, it actually used to happen like that with the DOJ. I don't know if the British operate the same way. I can't prove it. But I wouldn't be surprised.
But I think it does happen, yeah. I'd be very surprised if he wasn't coached into what to say there.
Right. But it's almost like, well, you have to do something, because whenever you see a case like this, and sometimes it even happens when no one's really to blame, parents are always like, well, how can I make this mean something? And then it becomes sort of a public policy thing. And so the obvious fallback here is, oh, we need to do more with like knife crime. But as you point out, it's not actually going to do anything. But what's the alternative? The alternative is you say, hey, he was a victim of multiculturalism, multiracialism. Forget the social costs of saying that, even with whatever sympathy you would get from being a murder victim's father. I mean, at that point, you're basically saying all the stuff that my entire society has taught me over my entire life was wrong. Now what do I do? And it's almost like a lot of white people like know that in their gut, but they know if they like take one step down that road, there's no going back. And so the best thing to do is never take that step.
Yeah, it's like if you say it's about knife crime, then it's a bit smaller. It's more manageable. If you say, actually, my son was just one victim in a very, very, very long story involving an ideology that is deeply ingrained in every institution of the society, that's a much bigger problem to solve. Whereas if you say it's just knives, then you still can't solve it, but at least it's a small problem relatively.
Right. People will pat you on the head when you set up a box the blade or whatever the stupid things that they have, right?
Yeah,
bin the blades or whatever it is. I mean, does anyone even believe this at this point? I guess this is the real question, because you still see people coming up with this, but it doesn't seem like. It's almost like a parody. Like, we're going to ban guns, and that didn't work. So now we're going to ban knives, and that's not working. Well, what do you do next? And the problem is you almost like don't want to suggest it, because you feel like some British politician is like, well, we're going to come up with something, and then we're actually going to try to do it. Like, they don't seem to have any limits on how far they're willing to go to regulate social behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as I said, I think that this has changed. It just feels like this has been a punch in the guts to the native British public. Now, some of them will delude themselves about it, but I think that's a dwindling percentage. You've still got these crazy lefties. There was actually a vigil held for Henry Nowak a few days. I think it was a few days ago. And stand up to racism actually. I mean, it's incredible. It's like the Extinction Rebellion people, how you think, how can they think that is going to help their cause? Interrupting the vigil for a murder victim how can you think that will help your cause? But they did it. But that just underlines that they're a bit kooky, these people, and that they're tone deaf, and that they're bound to just alienate themselves from the general public. And that's probably just going to increase. If they're this tone deaf now, I think that points to that they're just ideologically bound. They're just obsessed with anti-racism and equality and all this, the delusions that the public were immersed in 10 years ago, 5 years ago, but are now rapidly shedding. Well, you've still got these ideological leftists who are talking as if it's still 2019, and it's not. And I think that the more that they stick to their guns, the more they will just alienate themselves from the general public. And in the meantime, the general public, I think, is bound to move towards first reform and then restore. Hopefully,
you think it'll be like a two-step thing?
Reform. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Well, it might be. With some people, it'll be 2 steps, because I think a lot of people will need to see that Nigel Farage isn't a serious man and reform isn't a serious project. And some will need to learn that the hard way. So it might be that we have to have a reform government. But I do think that eventually it will either be a restore government, or it'll be something it'll be something equivalent to restore. But that is now where things are going. That's the trajectory. And all of the elements on the game board, as it were, mean that will continue to be the trajectory. It's not going to calm down now.
Right.
There's no reason why that would happen now. So things are just going to get more febrile. And I think eventually you're going to have either restore or something equivalent to it, or perhaps more hardline than that. But we are never going back to the Tony Blair days, New Labour, the 2000s, which now seems, as bland as it was at the time, it now seems like a sort of utopia.
Right.
compared to, it's like night and day comparing the 2000s with the 2020s in Britain. It's quite amazing what's happened.
Yeah, cool Britannia is the kind of thing like Peter Hitchens would go nuts about, but then you look at it and it's like, man, I didn't know how good they had it. It was just, it seems like heaven compared to what exists now. But I guess that's the broader thing, is that, especially with older voters, I mean, you see this in America too, of course, it's almost like it hasn't quite gotten through their heads that things have in fact changed. I mean, they're still sort of living in this idea of, I think of what the Tories just said. If we just go back to the days where race didn't matter in law, everything will be okay. And there's almost a complete unawareness of, well, we tried that and it didn't work. So now what do we do? And I think that the real danger becomes, and you're already seeing this with the way people are talking about this case, we need to make sure we don't politicize this case, not because we really have logical arguments against it, but because it's going to cause some unpleasantness, and we're going to have to do things. And once we start doing these sorts of things, there's going to be a conflict, and we just want to pretend that we can somehow get around this conflict. But it seems like every day in Britain, you just get more and more evidence that there's no getting around this conflict. Same thing in Paris with those recent riots. Same thing, we're just about everywhere. I mean, we've basically done all we can to try to weasel our way out of this, and there doesn't seem to be any escape at this point.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's going to be very unpleasant, including for people like me who have been visibly, publicly talking about it. It's not going to be pleasant. But unfortunately, our countries have gone in this direction. Our politicians have taken our countries in this direction for decades, against the public will, against common sense, against all the lessons of history. They've insisted on doing this. And of course, I know that they were acting under orders. I know it wasn't their idea, but they were the people who implemented it. So if they'd listened to the likes of us 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, our countries would be in a much safer position now, much less precarious. But they didn't, and they demonized us and all the rest of it. And now our countries are in this precarious position. And I wish it weren't that. I wish that weren't the case. But it is, and we're going to have to deal with it. We're all going to have to deal with it. And I think a lot of us are going to have to wise up, and we're going to have to change our thinking and get up to speed with the realities of human nature, which we should never have been oblivious to in the first place. But
Right.
what can you can't really blame the general public, because they were just following what they were told by the mainstream media. So,
Right.
but I think a lot of them are going to wake up and are waking up in real time, and things like the Henry Nowak killing, unfortunately, helped that along.
Do you think that the Labor government can hold on until, it's 2029 is in theory to where they can, in theory, govern to until a general election? Because, there is kind of a time limit here. And there's only, as people were saying at the Remigration Summit, you've only got, 10, 15 years before the numbers start getting truly ominous. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen pretty soon. But on the other hand, it seems like the Labor government is just in total free fall. And as far as the Greens, which seem to be the emerging new force, what's so weird about the Greens is it's basically isn't their leader's like a Jewish guy, and then you've got like hysterical white women getting elected, but all the voters tend to be Muslims. And I just don't see how that coalition can get anywhere.
Yeah, they did very well at the Gorton and Denton by-election, but then at the recent council elections,
right,
they did very badly, the Green Party. I don't know what that indicates, but I'm less concerned about them as an electoral force than I was before the council elections. So whether they're going to be a big thing or not, I'm not convinced. They might be, but I don't think so. I think it will be concentrated in specific areas, which the Green Party's appeal always has been. It will be the student areas, the lefty, hippie sort of areas like Bristol and Brighton. The rest of the country, I doubt that their draw with white lefties nationwide is economic stuff. Your rent's high, your bills are high, we'll help you out. But really, they're relying, at least in Gorton and Denton, they were relying on the Muslim vote. So I think everywhere else, where those factors don't apply, the Green Party probably doesn't have a chance. So I'm not too worried about them. I think the real thing is reform versus restore. And Labour and the Conservatives, I think, are just dead men walking. They're just not going to matter in the future. So, there will be some opposition from the left. It probably will be embodied in the Green Party, but I think that the general public are moving away from that, moving away from the ideas that are embodied by the Green Party. So, I'm not too worried about it. The way I see it, the battle now is to get the Civ Nat types who vote reform to vote for restore instead. And I think that is the challenge that certainly we should be concentrating on in our movement. That's what I would say.
Last question then, just because I've always said that if there was one country that I think is the most European country that is the most unstable, where you have the most tribalism, where the government has this, you really have a sense of like a British regime, like a permanent regime that seems unstable and too reliant on hard repression, and things could actually go haywire there in a way that other places couldn't. I've always said the United Kingdom is probably the most unstable. Is that an exaggeration, or do you get that sense too? Because there just seems to be this weird, I don't know, you see it in the media, you see it in the way people talk. There just seems to be this weird sense among the British people that like it just can't go on like this. Whereas like the danger in something like Germany or France or the Netherlands is you sort of imagine maybe it just could go on like this forever.
Yeah, and I don't think it will in Germany or France either. But I think it's an interesting point you make about in Britain, there seems to be a deep state, a permanent civil service, a permanent government, regardless. So there's a continuity that goes back to the empire and was probably created for the empire. And then once that went down, it remained the Secret Service, MI5, collaborating with the CIA here and there, etc. And then latterly, it is really poised against the native population.
Yeah, right.
Surveilling them, interrogating them, debanking them, etc., etc. So yeah, I think that that's probably true, that there is a British regime in a way that there isn't a French regime or an Italian regime, etc. But I also think that, as you say, that regime is now, I don't know if it's falling apart. I just think that its ideas, the people who populate that regime are indoctrinated with ideas that make them, that are simply incompatible with the emerging reality. And so those ideas fate those people in the civil service and so forth to make fools of themselves.
Right.
And at some point, they're going to have to adapt, or, I mean, who knows what will happen to them? I don't know. But you know, historical examples of regimes that refuse to listen to reality, it doesn't tend to end well for them.
No, it does not. Don't even have to go beyond English history to look at that. So
exactly. And so I think that we're definitely, you know, just as an end note, I think that we're definitely heading into interesting times. I'm very sorry that Henry Nowak is dead. I think that what happened to him was appalling, both the murder and the treatment by the police. So I'm sorry that it had to happen. I'm sorry that a lot of people will only have been woken up by that. But you could equally say it's a shame that people had to be woken up by the grooming gangs, by hearing about that.
Right.
But they did. And so that is like, well, okay, at least if these things happen, at least it's not entirely in vain, because it awakens the general public, the British people, to the situation that they're in. So at least some good can come from it. And I think that is happening. And I do think that the next 10 years in Britain, I think, are going to be a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll leave it on that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be hard, and I think it's going to be more unpleasant than people expect, but there's definitely a hope for victory that I don't think was there 15 years ago. We're not just talking on the internet now. Things are getting real.
Exactly. We might find ourselves rather swamped and bamboozled by and amazed by what happens in the next few years, I think.
Yeah, I'm ready for it. Here's hoping. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today, man. Really appreciate it. And thank you again. I encourage everybody to check out the Substack where they can read your article. Where can people find you on that Substack?
It's got a very easy URL, which I got earlier this year. It's simply woes.blog. So if you go to woes.blog, you will find it, and you'll find right now the most recent essay there is about the Henry Nowak murder. So it's quite a long one. It's over 4,000 words, and I will be adding to it and revising it as things go on. So that will remain. I want that to remain like a definitive, truthful account, accurate account of what happened. So yeah, that's where to go. Woes.blog. I'm also elsewhere on on Odyssey, Telegram, Twitter, etc. But woes.blog is the place to read about it. It's the place to read my stuff.
All right, Millennial Woes, one of the best, and definitely check out that article, guys. Thank you so much. So, this is something that just happened yesterday. This report from Breitbart. Trump administration blocked from removing over 20 transgender troops. Just imagine telling somebody that 20 years ago. Quote, the Trump administration was blocked by a federal appeals court from banning almost 30 transgender identifying individuals from being able to serve in the United States military. In a 2-1 decision, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit found that 28 transgender individuals who had filed a lawsuit when the Trump administration barred transgender individuals from serving in the military are allowed to continue serving while the case proceeds, the New York Times reported. While the court's ruling applies only to 28 plaintiffs, the plaintiffs have called for the court to extend the protection to all transgender troops, according to the outlet. In the beginning days of his second term in office, President Trump issued an executive order proclaiming that persons expressing a false gender identity divergent from an individual's sex cannot satisfy the rigorous standards necessary for military service, Judge Robert L. Wilkins wrote in the majority opinion. The president and later Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, now designated as Secretary of War, also declared that persons afflicted with gender dysphoria are unfit for military service because, among other things, the character of such persons, in the president's and secretary's words, is inconsistent with the high standards of honesty, humility, and integrity. In its litigation, the government has not attempted to defend or provide any factual basis for these disparaging characterizations of American citizens, unquote. Yeah. And I'm sure when it's useful. I love like the reference there. Oh, American citizens, how dare you say this? Yeah, if it was useful to this judge, they would also tell us citizenship doesn't matter. And of course, just a few years ago, by definition, transgenderism would be considered literal insanity. Now, apparently, you just have a right to be in the military, and the commander-in-chief and the secretary of war do not have the authority to determine who gets in. Random judges do, because that's how the Constitution is supposed to work, clearly. But leave that aside. Let's get real here. During the Biden administration, one of the very first things the Secretary of Defense did was he audited the entire military looking for right-wingers. And it led to a huge purge. You probably know guys who fell underneath it. Huge purge in the military over accusations of racism or being pro-white or being involved with J6 or prohibited groups. Doesn't matter if you're in a gang. Doesn't matter if you're affiliated with some pro-other racial group. But if you're pro-white, little too conservative, maybe you got a Confederate flag somewhere, now you're in trouble. Your career's over. And this still continues, by the way, even under the Trump administration. If you have the wrong likes on social media, if you got the wrong account somewhere, they can kick you out of the military. You show anything pro-white, that's your career. That does not apply to any other race. In fact, it's basically encouraged. Now, there's no protection for these people. There are no judges intervening. Practically every military hero in American history is, by today's standards, not just a racist, but a white nationalist, and would have defined America as a white country and said it was obvious they would not be allowed to serve today. What's really going on? One of the most important questions in politics is who has the right to wield state power, be it in the military, be it in any government job, anything where you get to possess authority. And defining who is considered a threat or not, and what is immoral or not, is a big part of that political struggle. In this country, we have seen the very definition of patriotism, loyalty to one's own people, go from the obvious and indisputable support of the state to the definition of treason within a generation. Same with moral questions. And when you see decisions like this, don't think about it in terms of the law. Don't even think about it in terms of morality. Don't think of it in terms of, whoa, the woke are crazy. No, it's a battle. It's a battle about taking control over the mechanisms of state power. That's what politics is all about. And even questions of morality are essentially political questions, downstream from power. Don't wave your hands around. Don't be some conic pundit and be like, whoa, the judge is crazy. No, he's acting perfectly rationally. It's other people, the people on your side, who are acting insane. This is precisely what you would expect from rational political actors who want to make sure the military is filled with those they see as allies. When you see the military welcoming back people who were purged under Biden, then we're seeing progress. But given that the GOP won't even support President Trump's effort to provide funds to those victimized under the last administration, don't count on that anytime soon. In the cold civil war that's already underway, only one side is fighting. And I think our job is to change that. I'm Kevin DeAnna. We'll talk again real soon. All right, guys, that's it for today's episode of Identity Politics. If you found this valuable and you want to see more of this kind of work, here's how you can help. First, follow the show and share it with people who need to hear it. We're on Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, X, TikTok, and you can also grab the RSS feed. Sharing it is the fastest way for us to grow. Second, sign up for our email list so we can always stay in direct contact no matter what the platforms decide. And most importantly, if you believe in our mission and want to keep it going, please consider supporting us on Ko-Fi. You can donate once or subscribe at the bronze, silver, gold, or white level. Every contribution, big or small, helps keep Identity Politics independent and alive. All the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. We'll see you next time.